The phone rang in Dean Martin's Beverly Hills mansion on a Tuesday evening in April 1972. Dean was in his study, bourbon in hand, reading through scripts his agent had sent over. He almost didn't answer. The private line rarely rang after 8 p.m., and when it did, it was usually Frank or one of the guys calling about a golf game or a gig. But something made him pick up on the third ring. Dean Martin, he said, his voice that familiar smooth baritone that millions knew from records and television. There was a pause on the other end, a breath, then a woman's voice, hesitant and cracking slightly. Dino, it's Mary Ellen Brocato. Dean's hand froze halfway to his mouth, the bourbon glass suspended in midair. That name, that voice, he hadn't heard it in 25 years, but he recognized it instantly, like a song you haven't heard since childhood that comes flooding back with every note intact. Mary Ellen, he said quietly, and in those two words were 1,000 memories. Steubenville, Ohio, high school dances, summer nights by the Ohio River, a girl with dark curls and a laugh that made the whole world seem possible, the girl he'd promised to come back for, the girl he'd left behind when he went to chase his dreams. I know I have no right to call you, she said, and Dean could hear she was crying. I swore I never would. But Dino, I don't know where else to turn. Dean sat down slowly in his leather chair. His heart was pounding. 25 years. A lifetime. He was Dean Martin now. Not Dino Crocetti, the Italian kid from Steubenville who worked in his father's barbershop and sang in local clubs for $20 a night. What's wrong? He asked. And despite everything, despite the years and the distance and the life he'd built without her, his voice was gentle, protective, the way it used to be when they were 17, and he'd walk her home from school, carrying her books like it was the most important job in the world. Mary Ellen took a shaky breath. It's my daughter, Angela. She's 16, Dino. She has leukemia. The words hit Dean like a physical blow. He set the bourbon glass down on his desk, his hands suddenly unsteady. The doctors say there's a treatment, Mary Ellen continued, her words rushing out now like she had to get them all out before she lost her nerve. An experimental treatment in Switzerland. It's her only chance. But it costs $75,000, and our insurance won't cover it because it's experimental, and I've been at every bank, every foundation. I've sold everything I own. She was sobbing now, the words barely coherent. I'm not asking because of what we were. I'm asking because I'm a mother and my daughter is dying, and you're the only person I know who could possibly. Dino, I'm begging you. Please, I'll pay you back. I don't know how or when, but I will. I'll work my whole life if I have to. Just please help save my little girl. Dean closed his eyes. In his mind, he could see Mary Ellen at 17, laughing as they danced at the Steubenville High School spring formal. He could see her cry on the front porch of her parents' house at night. He told her he was leaving for New York, that he had to try to make it, that he'd come back for her when he was somebody. He could hear his own voice making promises he believed he would keep. I'll send for you, he'd said. When I make it big, I'll come back and marry you, and we'll have the life we dreamed about. But he hadn't come back. He'd gone to New York and then Cleveland, started making a name for himself, met Jerry Lewis, and suddenly he was on his way up, and Mary Ellen became a beautiful memory, a sweet chapter in a book he'd closed. He'd heard through mutual friends years later that she'd married a guy from Steubenville, a steel worker named Tom Callahan. He'd felt a pang of something, guilt or loss or maybe relief, and then he'd moved on with his life. Mary Ellen, he said finally, his voice thick. Of course I'll help. Give me the details about the treatment, the hospital, everything. I'll make the arrangements. The sob that came through the phone was one of pure relief. Thank you. Oh, God, Dino, thank you. I don't know how to thank you. I'll never forget this. Never. After they hung up, Dean sat in his study for a long time, staring at nothing. The bourbon sat forgotten on his desk. His mind was thousands of miles and 25 years away. Back in Steubenville. Back when he was just a kid with a dream and a girl who believed in him. Back before he became Dean Martin. Before the fame and the money and the legend. Back when promises felt simple and keeping them felt possible. The year was 1947, and Dino Crocetti was 19 years old with a voice that could melt butter and dreams bigger than the steel mills that dominated Steubenville's skyline. He worked in his father's barbershop during the day, cutting hair and sweeping up, but at night, he sang in clubs across the Ohio River in Weirton, West Virginia, making decent money and building a reputation. Mary Ellen Brocato was the prettiest girl in Steubenville High School, a senior with dark Italian features and a smile that lit up every room she entered. She was smart, too, planning to go to nursing school after graduation. Her father owned a grocery store, and her mother was strict about who Mary Ellen could date, but she could date Dino Crocetti. His family was respected, his father a hard-working businessman, and besides, everyone knew young Dino was going places. They'd met at a church social when Dino was 17 and Mary Ellen was 15. He'd asked her to dance, and she'd said yes, and from that moment on, they were inseparable. He'd walk her home from school, carrying her books and singing to her, making her laugh with impressions of their teachers. On Friday nights, they'd go to the movies, and on Sundays, they'd walk along the Ohio River, talking about their futures. "I'm going to be a singer," Dino told her one warm Sunday afternoon in May, his arm around her shoulders as they sat on a bench overlooking the river. "Not just in clubs around here. I mean, really make it. New York, Hollywood, the big time." Mary Ellen leaned her head against his shoulder. "I know you will. You're better than anyone I've ever heard on the radio." "When I do," Dino said, taking her hand, "when I make it big, I'm coming back for you. We'll get married, and I'll buy you a house, and you'll never have to worry about money or anything. I promise you that, Mary Ellen. I promise." She kissed him then, believing every word. How could she not? When Dino Crocetti looked at you with those dark eyes and made a promise, it felt like the most certain thing in the world. But in the fall of 1947, opportunity came knocking. A booking agent from New York had heard Dino sing at a club in Wheeling and wanted to represent him. There were gigs in New York, a chance to audition for radio programs, real money and real exposure. But he had to go now, had to leave immediately. The music business didn't wait for anyone. The night before he left, Dino took Mary Ellen to their spot by the river. It was September, and the air was cooling, leaves just starting to turn. "I have to go," he said, holding both her hands. "This is my shot, Mary Ellen. If I don't take it now, I might never get another chance." She was crying, but she nodded. I know you have to go. How long will you be gone?" "I don't know," he admitted. "A few months, maybe longer, but I'll write to you every week. And as soon as I get established, as soon as I'm making real money and I have a place for us, I'll send for you. We'll get married in New York. How does that sound, Mrs. Dino Crocetti?" She smiled through her tears. "It sounds perfect. Promise me you'll wait for me," he said, pulling her close. "Promise me you won't forget about us while I'm gone." "I could never forget you," she whispered. "Never." They held each other as the sun set over the Ohio River. Two kids in love, making promises they believed would last forever. Neither of them knew that it was the last time they'd hold each other like that. The last time they'd be just Dino and Mary Ellen, before life and distance and ambition changed everything. For the first few months, Dino wrote letters every week, like he'd promised. He told Mary Ellen about New York, about the gigs he was getting, about the agent who was shopping him around to record labels. The letters were full of excitement and plans and reassurances that he was coming back for her soon. Mary Ellen wrote back, telling him about Steubenville, about her nursing school applications, about how much she missed him. But gradually, the letters came less frequently. Dino was busy, constantly working, constantly hustling. He'd changed his name to Dean Martin, at his agent's suggestion, something more American-sounding for the radio. He was getting better gigs, making more money, meeting more people. And the entertainment world was a whirlwind that didn't leave much time for looking back. Mary Ellen understood, or tried to. She told herself that Dean, was just busy building their future. But doubt crept in. Loneliness crept in. And when Tom Callahan, a nice guy who worked at Wheeling Steel, started asking her out, she initially said no. But Tom was persistent. Tom was there. Tom was offering her a life in Steubenville. Something real and present, not a dream thousands of miles away. In the spring of 1949, nearly 2 years after Dino had left, Mary Ellen wrote him a letter. She told him about Tom, about how she couldn't wait anymore, about how she needed to move on with her life. She told him she hoped he'd understand, that she'd always remember what they had, but that she had to be realistic. She was 21 years old, and she needed to build a real life, not wait for a dream that might never come true. Dean received the letter at his apartment in New York. He read it sitting on his couch, and he felt something crack inside him, but he didn't fight it. He didn't call her or write back begging her to reconsider. Part of him, the honest part, knew she was right. He'd been so consumed with his career, so focused on becoming somebody, that he'd let her slip away. And maybe, if he was really honest with himself, he'd let her go on purpose, because the life he was building didn't have room for Steubenville, for the past, for promises made by a 19-year-old kid who didn't understand how much everything would change. Mary Ellen married Tom Callahan in June 1949. They bought a small house in Steubenville, and Tom worked at the steel mill, while Mary Ellen worked as a nurse at the local hospital. In 1953, they had a daughter, Angela. In 1955, they had a son, Michael. It was a good life, a simple life, far removed from the glittering world that Dean Martin was conquering. And Dean did conquer that world. He partnered with Jerry Lewis, and together they became the biggest comedy act in America. Then he went solo, became a singer, an actor, a television star. He married, had children, divorced, married again. He became one of the most famous men in the world, part of the Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra, living a life of luxury and fame that the kid from Steubenville could never have imagined. But he never completely forgot Mary Ellen Brocato. Sometimes, late at night after a show, he'd think about her, wonder what had happened to her, wonder if she was happy, wonder if she ever thought about him. The past was like a ghost, always there in the shadows, never quite forgotten, until the night she called. Dean didn't sleep much that night after Mary Ellen's call. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, his mind churning. Helping her was financially easy. $75,000 was a lot of money to most people, but to Dean Martin, it was pocket change. He could write a check tomorrow and barely notice it in his account. The money wasn't the problem. The problem was everything the money represented. It was opening a door he'd closed 25 years ago. It was confronting the promise he'd broken, the girl he'd abandoned, the life he'd chosen not to live. It was admitting that despite all his success, despite everything he'd achieved, there were still debts unpaid. Not financial debts, moral ones, emotional ones. And there was another problem, one Dean barely wanted to admit to himself. Hearing Mary Ellen's voice had stirred something in him, something he thought was long dead. A feeling of what? Regret? Longing? He wasn't sure. He was 55 years old, twice divorced, with 7 children. He'd loved women, been loved by women, lived a life most men could only fantasize about. But Mary Ellen's voice on the phone had reached into a part of him that no one else had touched in 25 years. The part that still remembered what it felt like to be young and in love and believed that love could conquer anything. That scared him, because helping her daughter wasn't just about being a good person or keeping an old promise. It was about reopening a door to his past, to feelings and memories he'd worked hard to leave behind. And Dean didn't know if he was ready for that. Didn't know what it might cost him emotionally. The next morning, he called his business manager. "I need to wire $75,000, he said, "to a hospital in Switzerland. I'll give you the details. And I need it done quietly. No publicity, no records that can be traced easily. Can you do that?" His business manager, Phil, was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Dean, is everything okay? That's a lot of money. Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No trouble," Dean said. "I'm helping someone. An old friend. Her daughter is sick." Phil hesitated. "Dean, I've been managing your money for 15 years, and I've never questioned your decisions. But I have to ask, is this woman, this old friend, are you sure this is legitimate? I mean, with your profile, There are a lot of people who might try to take advantage. Dean felt a flash of anger. She's not trying to take advantage. Her daughter is dying, Phil. She needs help, and I'm helping her. That's all you need to know. Okay, Phil said quickly. Okay, I'll arrange it. But Dean, just so you know, something like this, it's hard to keep completely quiet. If the press gets wind of it, they're going to ask questions. They're going to want to know why Dean Martin is paying for some woman's daughter's medical treatment. Then we'll deal with that if it happens. Dean said, just make the arrangements. After he hung up, Dean sat in his study for a long time. Phil was right. In his world, in the world of fame and celebrity, nothing stayed private for long. Someone would find out. A nurse, a hospital administrator, a reporter looking for a story. And when they did, there would be questions. Questions Dean wasn't sure he wanted to answer. He thought about calling Frank, getting his advice. Frank had been through a share of controversy, had dealt with the press and rumors and scandal. But somehow, Dean didn't want to share this with anyone. This was between him and Mary Ellen. Between him and the kid from Steubenville who'd made a promise to a girl he loved. Between him and the man he'd become, who had to decide if old promises still mattered. 3 days later, the money was wired to the hospital in Switzerland. Dean received confirmation that Angela Callahan would begin treatment immediately. He called Mary Ellen to let her know. It's done, he said simply. The hospital has the money. Angela can start treatment. The sound Mary Ellen made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Dino, I don't know how to thank you. I'll never be able to repay you for this. Never. You don't need to repay me, Dean said quietly. Just let me know how she's doing. Let me know if she needs anything else. I will, Mary Ellen promised. Thank you. Thank you for remembering us. Thank you for keeping your promise, even after all these years. After they hung up, Dean sat with those words, keeping your promise. But had he kept his promise? He'd promised to come back for her, to marry her, to build a life with her. That promise had been broken decades ago. This, paying for Angela's treatment, this wasn't keeping an old promise. This was trying to make up for breaking one. Or maybe it was both. Maybe this was the only way he could keep the promise now, 25 years too late. Not by giving Mary Ellen the life he'd promised her, but by saving the life that mattered most to her, her daughter. It wasn't the same. It would never be the same. But it was something. It was what he could do now, with the man he'd become and the resources he had. And sometimes that had to be enough. Dean thought he'd managed to keep it quiet. For 3 weeks, Angela received treatment in Switzerland, and nobody in the press seemed to know anything about Dean's involvement. He checked in with Mary Ellen twice a week, getting updates on Angela's progress. The treatment was working. Angela was responding well. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Dean felt relief and something else. A strange kind of peace. He'd done the right thing. He'd helped someone who needed help. Someone who'd once meant everything to him. And maybe, just maybe, he'd balanced some kind of cosmic scale. Paid back a debt. Redeemed a broken promise. Then, on a Monday morning in May, his publicist called. Dean, we have a situation. Dean was eating breakfast on his patio, enjoying the California sunshine. What kind of situation? There's a story breaking. A reporter from the National Enquirer somehow found out about you paying for a girl's medical treatment in Switzerland. They're running with it tomorrow. The headline is going to be something like, Dean Martin's secret love child? Star pays for mystery girl's treatment. Dean felt his stomach drop. She's not my daughter. I know that, but they don't know that. Or maybe they do know that. And they don't care because the speculation sells papers. Either way, this is about to be a big story. We need to get ahead of it. Put out a statement. Clarify the situation. And say what? Dean asked. That she's the daughter of my high school girlfriend? That I abandoned Mary Ellen 25 years ago, and now I'm trying to make up for it by saving her kid? How does that make me look? Better than letting people think you have a secret daughter, his publicist said. At least that's honest. Look, Dean, I know this is personal, but we need to control the narrative here. If we don't say anything, The press is going to say it for us, and they're going to say whatever sells the most papers. We need to tell your side of the story." Dean rubbed his face. "Fine, write something up, but keep Mary Ellen out of it as much as possible. This is about helping a sick kid, not about our past." But the press didn't see it that way. The National Enquirer ran their story, and within days, every gossip magazine and tabloid in America was covering it. Dean Martin's mystery woman. Secret romance revealed after 25 years. Why is Dean really helping? The stories were wild, speculative, designed to sell papers and create scandal. Some suggested Angela was Dean's daughter, that he'd had a secret relationship with Mary Ellen during his marriage to his first wife. Others suggested this was a publicity stunt, that Dean was trying to repair his Playboy image by pretending to be charitable. Still others suggested there was an ongoing affair, that Dean and Mary Ellen had rekindled their romance, and Dean was trying to win her back by paying for her daughter's treatment. None of it was true, but the truth didn't matter. What mattered was the story, the speculation, the scandal. Dean tried to ignore it, but it was everywhere. He couldn't turn on the television or open a newspaper without seeing his face, seeing Mary Ellen's name, seeing wild theories about their relationship. His daughter Claudia called, upset and confused. "Dad, what's going on? Who is Mary Ellen Callahan? Did you really have a relationship with her while you were married to Mom?" "No," Dean said firmly. "Mary Ellen was my girlfriend in high school before I ever met your mother. I'm helping her daughter because she's sick and because I cared about Mary Ellen a long time ago. That's all." But explaining it to his own kids was one thing. Explaining it to the world was another. And the world didn't want simple explanations. The world wanted drama, scandal, secrets. The world wanted a story more interesting than successful man helps old girlfriend's sick daughter. His ex-wife Jean gave an interview to a magazine, saying she'd never heard Dean mention anyone named Mary Ellen in all their years together, suggesting there was more to the story than Dean was admitting. Frank called, offering support, but also warning Dean that this kind of publicity could hurt his career. "People don't like questions," Frank said. "They don't like mysteries. You need to clear this up completely, or it's going to follow you around." "I've told the truth," Dean said tiredly. "I don't know what else I can do." "Maybe you need to talk to Mary Ellen," Frank suggested. "Get your story straight. Make sure you're both saying the same thing." But Dean didn't want to call Mary Ellen. Didn't want to drag her further into this mess. She was in Switzerland with her daughter, watching Angela fight for her life. She didn't need to be dealing with reporters and photographers and scandal. This was his problem, his world, his consequence for trying to do something good. The controversy reached its peak when a reporter tracked down Mary Ellen in Switzerland and confronted her outside the hospital. "Mrs. Callahan, what's your relationship with Dean Martin? Is Angela his daughter? Are you two having an affair?" Mary Ellen, exhausted and emotional, said only, "Dean is an old friend who is helping my daughter. That's all. Please leave us alone." But of course, they didn't leave her alone. The picture of Mary Ellen outside the hospital, looking tired and harassed, ran on the front page of several tabloids. The headlines were cruel. "Mystery woman stonewalls questions. What is Mary Ellen hiding?" Dean saw the photo and felt sick. This was exactly what he wanted to avoid. He'd tried to help quietly, to do a good thing without making it public. But now Mary Ellen was being hounded by reporters, photographed at her most vulnerable, turned into a scandal. And for what? Because he'd tried to keep an old promise? Because he'd tried to save a dying girl? The cynicism of it all, the cruelty of the press, the way they'd taken something pure and twisted it into something ugly, it made Dean question everything. Was this worth it? Had he made things worse by helping? Would Mary Ellen and Angela have been better off if he just said no? 2 weeks into media frenzy, Dean made a decision. He got on a plane to Switzerland. He didn't tell his publicist, didn't tell Frank, didn't tell anyone. He just went. He needed to see Mary Ellen face to face. Needed to make sure she was okay. Needed to apologize for the circus his help had created. The hospital was a private facility outside Zurich, specializing in experimental cancer treatments. Dean arrived in the afternoon, wearing sunglasses and a hat, trying to be inconspicuous. It didn't work. A photographer spotted him entering the hospital, and within an hour, there were a dozen reporters outside. Dean ignored them, asking at the reception desk for Angela Callahan's room. The nurse looked at him with recognition and something like sympathy. "Mr. Martin, Mrs. Callahan said if you came, to send you up, 5th floor, room 507. Dean took the elevator up, his heart pounding. He hadn't seen Mary Ellen in 25 years. Not since that night by the river in Steubenville. What would she look like? What would he say to her? How could he possibly explain the disaster his help had become? Room 507 had a window looking out over the Swiss Alps. It was a bright, clean room filled with flowers and get-well cards. In the bed by the window was a teenage girl, thin and pale, and 4 in her arm. She was awake, reading a magazine. In the chair beside the bed was Mary Ellen. She was 43 years old now, but Dean would have known her anywhere. Her dark hair was threaded with gray, and there were lines around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there when she was 17. But she was still beautiful. Still the girl from Steubenville, just older, weathered by life and motherhood and worry. She looked up when Dean entered, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. 25 years collapsed into nothing. He was 19 again, and she was 17, and they were standing by the Ohio River, making promises they believed would last forever. "Hi," Dean said finally, his voice rough. "Hi, Dino," Mary Ellen said, standing up, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about all of this, about the reporters and the stories and dragging you into this mess." "You didn't drag me into anything," Dean said. "I wanted to help. I'm just sorry it turned into such a circus." Angela was watching them both with wide eyes. Mary Ellen turned to her. "Angela, this is Dino. I mean Dean Martin. He's an old friend. The one I told you about. The one who's been helping us." Angela smiled, a weak but genuine smile. "Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mom told me about you, about how you used to sing to her by the river." Dean felt something break in his chest. He walked over to bed and took Angela's hand gently. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Angela said. "The doctors say the treatment is working. They think I'm going to beat this." "Good," Dean said, his voice thick. "That's real good." He turned to Mary Ellen. "Can we talk? Maybe in the hallway?" Mary Ellen nodded and followed him out of the room. They stood in the quiet hospital corridor, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "I saw what the reporters have been doing to you," Dean finally said. "Following you, taking pictures, making up stories." "Mary Ellen, I never wanted that. I was trying to help without anyone knowing." "I know," Mary Ellen said softly. "I know you were. And Dino, what you did, paying for Angela's treatment, giving her a chance to live. There are no words for what that means to me. You saved my daughter's life. Nothing else matters. Not the reporters, not the stories, none of it. It matters to me," Dean said, "because I didn't do this for publicity or to look like a good guy. I did it because..." He paused, trying to find the words. "Because I owed you. Because I made you a promise 25 years ago, and I broke it. Because I left you in Steubenville and never came back. And maybe I can't fix that, but I could fix this. I could save Angela. And I needed to do that. For you, but also for me. Does that make sense?" Mary Ellen's eyes were streaming with tears now. "Dino, you didn't owe me anything. What happened between us? That was a lifetime ago. We were kids. You had dreams, and you went after them. I never blamed you for that. Maybe you should have..." Dean said, "I promised to come back for you. I promised we'd be together. And I broke that promise because my career was more important. Because becoming Dean Martin was more important than keeping Dino Crocetti's promises. You became Dean Martin," Mary Ellen said gently, "because that's who you were meant to be. You had a gift, Dino, a voice and a talent that the world needed to hear. If you'd come back to Steubenville, if you'd married me like we planned, you would have been miserable. You would have always wondered what you could have been." "Maybe," Dean admitted, "but I still wonder sometimes. What if I had come back? What if we'd gotten married? Would I have been happy? Would you? Mary Ellen smiled sadly. We'll never know, but I can tell you this. I had a good life with Tom. He was a good man, a good husband, a good father. We built a life together in Steubenville. We had Angela and Michael, and we were happy. Different from what we dreamed about by the river, but happy in its own way. Tom died 3 years ago. Heart attack, and I miss him every day. I'm sorry, Dean said. I didn't know. How would you? Mary Ellen said. We lived in different worlds. Dino, you became this huge star, and I became a nurse in Steubenville. Our paths went in completely different directions. And that's okay. That's life. But when Angela got sick, when I'd exhausted every option and didn't know where to turn, I thought of you. I thought of those promises you made by the river. And I hoped, I prayed, that maybe some part of that boy I loved was still inside Dean Martin. He is. Dean said quietly. He's always been there. Sometimes I forget about him, get caught up in being Dean Martin, the entertainer, the celebrity. But he's there, the kid from Steubenville who loved a girl named Mary Ellen and wanted to give her the world. They stood there in the hospital hallway, two middle-aged people carrying the weight of choices made and promises broken and lives lived separately. And Dean realized something. He'd been carrying guilt for 25 years. Guilt about leaving Mary Ellen. Guilt about breaking his promise. Guilt about choosing his dreams over their love. But looking at her now, seeing the life she'd lived, the woman she'd become, the daughter she'd raised, he understood that she didn't need his guilt. She didn't need his regrets. What she needed was help when her daughter was dying, and he'd given her that. Everything else, all the history and the promises and the what-ifs, they were just ghosts. Real but not substantial. Important but not more important than the present. Than Angela fighting for her life in that hospital room. Thank you for coming, Mary Ellen said. I know it wasn't easy with all the reporters and the scandal, but it means a lot to me that you're here. I had to see you, Dean said. Had to make sure you were okay. And I want to tell you something. What? That I'm glad you called me. Not just because I could help Angela, but because it reminded me of who I used to be before the fame and the money and the celebrity. When I was just a kid with a dream and a girl I loved. That kid made a lot of promises he couldn't keep. But this one, saving your daughter, this one he could keep. And I'm glad he did. Mary Ellen hugged him then, and Dean held her. And for a moment, they were 17 and 19 again, standing by the Ohio River, believing in forever. Then they pulled apart. And they were just two people who'd once loved each other, grateful for what they'd had and grateful for what they could still give each other. Even after all this time. Go back to Angela, Dean said. I'm going to head out. Try to avoid the reporters as much as possible. Will you come back? Mary Ellen asked. Before you leave Switzerland? If you want me to, Dean said. I like that. Angela will like that too. She's been reading about you, watching your movies. I think she's a little starstruck. Dean smiled. Tell her I'm just a guy from Steubenville. Nothing special. We both know that's not true, Mary Ellen said softly. Goodbye, Dino. Goodbye, Mary Ellen. Dean did visit Angela 3 more times before he left Switzerland. He brought her records, told her stories about Steubenville, about her mother when she was young, about the Ohio River and the dreams they'd had. He sang for her, quietly, old standards that made her smile. And he saw Mary Ellen each time, and they talked, not about the past or broken promises or what might have been, but about the present, about Angela's progress, about Mary Ellen's life in Steubenville, about Dean's children and his career. They became, after 25 years, friends again. Not the passionate young lovers they'd been, but something deeper and more lasting. People who'd shaped each other's lives in fundamental ways, who carried pieces of each other's histories, who understood where each other came from even though they'd ended up in completely different places. The media eventually lost interest in the story. A bigger scandal emerged involving another celebrity, and the reporters moved on to their next target. Dean returned to California, to his life, to his career. Mary Ellen stayed in Switzerland with Angela until the treatment was complete, then returned to Steubenville. Angela made a full recovery. The experimental treatment worked, and by the end of 1972, her cancer was in remission. She would go on to live a long, healthy life, eventually becoming a doctor herself, specializing in pediatric oncology, saving other children the way she'd been saved. Dean never spoke publicly about what happened beyond his initial statement. He didn't give interviews about Mary Ellen or Angela or why he'd helped. When reporters asked, he'd simply say, "I helped an old friend. That's all there is to it." And eventually they stopped asking. But privately, with Frank and the guys, late at night over bourbon and cigars, he'd sometimes talk about it. "You know what I learned," he said one night, "that you can't escape your past. You can run from it, build a new life, become a completely different person, but it's still there, still part of you." That why you helped her? Frank asked, "To make peace with your past?" "Maybe," Dean said, "or maybe I help her because it was the right thing to do. Because when someone you once loved calls you and says their kid is dying and you're the only one who can help, you help. You don't think about the past or the consequences or what it means. You just help, even when it turns into a mess." Frank asked, referring to the media circus, "Especially when it turns into a mess." Dean said, "Because that's when it matters most. When it's easy, when it's convenient, when it doesn't cost you anything, that's not really helping. That's just being nice. But when it's hard, when it costs you something, when it opens up old wounds and creates new problems, and you still do it anyway, that's when it means something. That's when you find out what kind of person you really are." Years later, in 1988, Dean was interviewed for a retrospective about his life and career. The interviewer, inevitably, asked about the Mary Ellen Callahan incident. "Do you regret helping her?" The interviewer asked. Knowing the controversy it caused, the scrutiny it brought, "Do you ever wish you'd said no?" Dean looked at the interviewer like he'd asked the stupidest question in the world. "Regret saving a kid's life? Are you kidding me? That girl, Angela, she's a doctor now. She's saving other kids' lives. She's got a family of her own. She's alive because I wrote a check. You think I regret that?" "But the scandal," the interviewer started. "The scandal was nothing," Dean interrupted. Reporters asking questions, people speculating. So what? That fades. That goes away. But Angela Callahan is still alive. That doesn't fade. That doesn't go away. That matters. "What about your relationship with Mary Ellen?" The interviewer pressed. "Did helping her daughter change things between you?" Dean smiled a little sadly. "Mary Ellen and I, we had something beautiful once. But we were kids, and we wanted different things, and life took us in different directions. That's not tragic. That's just life. But when she needed help, when her daughter's life was on the line, I could be there for her in a way I wasn't before. I could keep a promise, even if it wasn't the promise I originally made." "Do you still talk to her?" "Christmas cards," Dean said. "Updates about our kids. She came to one of my shows a few years back, brought Angela. We had dinner, talked about old times. It was nice. It was good. We're friends." "Not more than friends?" Dean shook his head. "We had our time, Mary Ellen and I. It was a long time ago, and it was beautiful, and it ended the way it needed to end. Trying to go back, trying to recapture that, it wouldn't work. We're different people now. But we can still care about each other. We can still be there when it matters. That's enough." The interviewer looked disappointed, like he'd been hoping for a more dramatic answer, a confession of undying love or bitter regret. But Dean had learned long ago that life wasn't a movie. It didn't have neat endings or dramatic revelations. It was messy and complicated. And sometimes the best you could do was show up when someone needed you and hope that was enough. Dean Martin died in December 1995 at the age of 78. Among the hundreds of people who attended his funeral was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and kind eyes. Mary Ellen Callahan, standing with her daughter Angela, now a successful oncologist with 2 children of her own. When it was her turn to speak, Mary Ellen walked the podium. She talked about knowing Dean when he was Dino Crocetti, just a kid with a dream and a voice that could break your heart. She talked about summer nights by the Ohio River and promises made under the stars. But mostly, She talked about what happened in 1972, about calling him in desperation, about his decision to help, even though it cost him privacy and peace and subjected him to scandal, about his visits to Switzerland, singing quietly to a sick girl, giving her hope. People have asked me over the years what Dean Martin was really like. Mary Ellen said her voice steady despite her tears. They want to know if the persona was real or if it was all an act. And I can tell you that Dino was the most genuine person I ever knew. He left Steubenville to chase a dream, and he caught it. He became one of the most famous entertainers in the world. But he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the people he'd known before the fame. And when one of those people needed help, he gave it without hesitation, even though it would have been so much easier to say no. She paused, looking at the casket. In 1947, a 19-year-old boy promised me the world. He promised me a life of glamour and excitement and love. And I'm not going to lie and say it didn't hurt when he didn't come back, when that promise was broken. But 25 years later, he kept a different promise, a more important one. He saved my daughter's life. He gave me 23 more years with Angela. He gave me grandchildren I never thought I'd meet. So yes, he broke one promise, but he kept the one that mattered most. And I will be grateful to him for the rest of my life. Dean Martin was a great entertainer. But more than that, he was a great man. A man of honor, of integrity, of compassion. A man who understood that fame and wealth mean nothing if you don't use them to help people. A man who remembered where he came from and who he used to be. I loved him when we were kids. And I loved him when he saved my daughter. And I'll love him for the rest of my life. Not as a fan or as someone who knew a celebrity, but as someone who knew Dino Crocetti, the best man I ever knew. Angela spoke too, briefly, thanking Dean for the life he'd given her, for the opportunity to become a doctor, to have children, to make a difference. Mr. Martin never asked for recognition or gratitude, Angela said. He never wanted people to know what he did for us. But I think it's important that people understand who he really was. Not just the entertainer, but the man who saved a stranger's life because it was the right thing to do. After the funeral, as people were leaving, Angela approached Frank Sinatra. Mr. Sinatra, I just wanted to thank you for being Dean's friend, for standing by him when the press was attacking him over helping us. Frank looked at her with those famous blue eyes, sad but kind. Sweetheart, Dean didn't need me to stand by him. He knew what he was doing was right, and that was enough for him. That's who Dean was. He didn't need approval or validation. He just did what his conscience told him to do. Still, Angela said, it must have meant something to him, knowing you supported him. Frank smiled slightly. You want to know what Dean said to me during all that mess in 72? He said, Frank, if doing the right thing was easy, everyone would do it. It's hard and it costs you something, and people will question your motives and make up stories. But you still do it because at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself. That was Dean. He lived with himself just fine because he knew who he was and what he stood for. The story of Dean Martin paying for Angela Callahan's treatment became, over time, one of the defining stories of his life. Not because it was the most dramatic or the most public, but because it revealed something essential about who he was. It showed that beneath the smooth persona, beneath the carefully crafted image of the cool entertainer who took nothing too seriously, was a man of deep principle and genuine compassion. It showed that Dean Martin remembered where he came from, that he honored old connections, old friendships, old promises, that he understood something fundamental, that fame and wealth can't erase your history. They can't erase the people who knew you before you were famous, who believed in you when you were nobody. And when those people need you, you show up, you help, you do the right thing, even when it's hard. The controversy that surrounded his decision to help, the speculation and scandal and media circus, that all faded with time. But what didn't fade was the essential truth of what he'd done. He'd saved a life. He'd kept a promise, even if it wasn't a promise he'd originally made. He'd proven that some bonds transcend time and distance. That love, in its various forms, has responsibilities and debts that don't expire. Mary Ellen lived to be 87, passing away peacefully in 2015. In her obituary, Her children mention her nursing career, her dedication to her community, her kindness and strength. But they also mention her connection to Dean Martin, not as a scandalous footnote, but as an important part of her story. Our mother had the privilege of knowing Dino Crocetti before he became Dean Martin. The obituary read, and she never forgot the generous, talented, kind-hearted boy from Steubenville who grew up to become one of America's greatest entertainers and an even better man. Angela Callahan continued Dean's legacy in her own way. As a pediatric oncologist, she dedicated her career to treating children with cancer, offering them the same chance at life that Dean had given her. She often told her patients and their parents about the man who'd saved her life, about how an old friend of her mother's had stepped up when no one else could. "Mr. Martin taught me that we have a responsibility to help when we can," she'd say. "That wealth and success are meaningless unless you use them to make a difference. I became a doctor because I wanted to give other children what he gave me, a future." The story resonates because it speaks to something universal, the complexity of human relationships, the weight of promises made and broken, the possibility of redemption, even decades later, the understanding that doing the right thing often comes with a cost, but that cost is worth paying. Dean Martin could have said no when Mary Ellen called. He could have sent a polite refusal, wished her well, and gone back to his life. No one would have blamed him. They'd been apart for 25 years. He owed her nothing, at least not legally or practically. But Dean understood something that many people don't, that some debts aren't legal or practical. They're moral, they're emotional, they're about honoring who you used to be and the people who helped make you who you are. Mary Ellen had loved him when he was nobody. She believed in his dreams when they seemed impossible. She'd been part of his story before there was a story to tell. And when she needed him, truly needed him, he couldn't turn away. The controversy that erupted around his decision, the accusations and speculation in media frenzy, those are the costs of doing the right thing. Dean paid that cost willingly because he understood that integrity isn't about doing what's easy or convenient. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The easy thing would have been to say no, to protect his privacy, to avoid the scandal. But Dean had never taken the easy path. He'd left Steubenville with nothing but a voice and a dream. He'd worked in clubs and dives, struggling for years before making it big. He'd faced rejection and hardship and doubt. He'd learned that anything worth having requires sacrifice. And in 1972, when Mary Ellen called, he made another sacrifice. He sacrificed his privacy, his carefully maintained image, his peace of mind. He reopened old wounds and faced old guilt. He subjected himself to speculation and judgment and scandal. He did all of that to save the life of a girl he'd never met, the daughter of a woman he'd loved and left a lifetime ago. People often asked Dean if he regretted his decision, if the controversy had been worth it, and he always answered the same way, by asking if Angela Callahan's life had value, if saving her had mattered. And when put that way, the answer was obvious. Of course it mattered. Of course it was worth it. A life saved is always worth whatever scandal or controversy or cost comes with saving it. That's not complicated. That's not ambiguous. That's a simple moral truth that Dean understood in his bones. In the end, the story of Dean Martin and Mary Ellen Callahan isn't about broken promises or lost love or scandal. It's about redemption and responsibility and the enduring power of human connection. It's about understanding that our past doesn't stay in the past. It shapes us, follows us, sometimes calls us in the middle of the night asking for help. And when it does, we have a choice. We can turn away, or we can answer. Dean Martin answered. He picked up the phone. He wrote the check. He faced the scandal. He flew to Switzerland. He held Mary Ellen while she cried. He sang to a dying girl. He did what needed to be done, regardless of the cost. And in doing so, he proved something essential, that fame and wealth and success are meaningless unless you use them to help people. That promises matter, even 25 years later. That love in all its forms creates obligations that don't expire. That being a good person isn't about avoiding mistakes or never breaking promises. It's about showing up when it matters, helping when you can, and living with integrity even when it's hard. August 12, 1972. The night Mary Ellen Callahan called Dean Martin asking for help. The night Dean said yes, knowing the cost, accepting it anyway. The night that proved Dean Martin wasn't just a great entertainer. He was a man of honor, a man who remembered where he came from, a man who understood that some promises transcend time, that some debts must be paid, that some lives must be saved, regardless of what it costs. That's Dean Martin's real legacy. Not the songs or the movies or the Rat Pack legend, but the simple act of answering a phone call, hearing desperation, and saying yes. The simple act of being human, being decent, being there when someone needs you. That's what makes someone great. Not their talent or their fame or their success, but their willingness to help, to sacrifice, to do the right thing even when it's hard. Dean Martin was great because when Mary Ellen Callahan needed him most, he didn't hesitate. He just helped. And Angela lived. And that, in the end, is all that matters.